What is up, my friends? What is going on? It is good to be back. Glad to have you here. My name is Control for Dave, and today I'm going to take you through the 8 steps that I took myself to become a Modern Yawgmoth master. Now you might be saying to yourself, dude, who are you? Who are you to tell me how to become a Yawgmoth master? You're not so-and-so or this guy over here. Go fuck yourself. Just kidding. Just kidding. I don't mean that. But the reality of the situation is I have had immense success with this deck, and it's not me bragging. I'm very grateful for the success I've had. I've had some pretty outstanding results over the course of the last couple of years since I first picked up this deck. And what I want to do is I want to bestow that knowledge upon you. I want to teach you. I want to empower you to start taking control of the situation so you too can dominate tournaments just like I have over the last couple of years. Today, I'm going to take you through 8 steps that I have outlined in a series of bullet points. And then at the end of today's video, I'm going to give you a shortcut, a trick, a gift, if you may, to help expedite this process for you so you can condense what I've learned over the course of 3 years into only 8 weeks' time. So with all that being said, let's jump right into it. Let me tell you step 1 of how to become a Yawgmoth master. First and foremost, you need to know your deck list. And your deck list needs to be optimized. There's a bunch of different ways to go about doing this. There's a bunch of different ways to familiarize yourself with your deck list. But for me personally, when I first started playing the deck, and even to this day, trying to improve my play and my understanding of the interactions within the deck, I first started out by just watching people who I respected play the deck. I watched as much content as I could. I absorbed as much knowledge as I could. And as I was watching, I was an active participant. I was saying, okay, why did they do this? Why did they do that? What would I have done differently? Why would I have done that differently? I was engaging with the player and I was making decisions, actively thinking as I was going through the process. And then after I got comfortable watching other people play it, I said, hey, let me dip my 2 feet into the water. Let me give this thing a try. So the next thing I did was I goldfished with the deck. And for some people who might not be familiar with that term, goldfishing just means playing your deck without an opponent, drawing your hands, playing out your cards, and playing in a sequence as if you were playing against an opponent with nobody there to interact back with you. I have done this with this deck thousands of times, if not tens of thousands of times. It's a good way to pass the time, and it also helps you to start to recognize patterns. And patterns are a key with respect to playing this deck and getting better as a player as a whole, regardless of which deck you're playing. You need to be familiar with common patterns in gameplay, and you also need to be familiar with patterns with respect to your opening hands. Is this a strong hand? Is this a weak hand? Seeing the patterns over and over and over again will start to make you aware of those things. Once you can see the patterns and you acknowledge the patterns, you start to identify weaknesses with respect to maybe your deck list or maybe your play choices. But starting to become aware and starting to see those things after you get intimately familiar with the deck itself can start to bring awareness and help to improve you as a player. So that was the first step I took with regards to this deck and the first step to mastery with Black-Green Yawgmoth. After you know your deck intimately, that takes me to our second point, which is having a game plan and executing it. And you might be saying like, bro, I just draw my hand, I play my cards and stuff happens. Like, what more do you want me to do? It's just luck. It's just what happens. No, you need to not only know your deck list inside and out, but you need to know all of the lines that the deck has available to it inside and out. Every single scenario, every single possible iteration of what to do in what scenario is going to help to aid you to become an expert with the deck. So what that means is you need to know all of the available combos, which with Yawgmoth nowadays is a challenging task because there's probably about 25 different combo lines that you can take. You need to understand when to commit to the combo, what matchups it's best to commit to the combo, and what matchups it's best to kind of approach with a more controlling or grindier game plan. Also, you need to know how to adapt your plan. How do I shift from one lane to the next? How do I start as a combo player with the intent to kill them in that way, and then move over to that controlling game plan midway through the game? So acknowledging, understanding, and being aware of what your game plan is, how to execute it, and then going forth and adapting given different situations is critical if you're playing this deck and you want to have mastery. Moving on to the third key. The first key we talked about patterns. You need to recognize patterns. And the third key is going to be refining those patterns. So we've already started to recognize, we've already started to bring awareness to the patterns with respect to our own tendencies, our own gameplay. And now we need to acknowledge and figure out which of those patterns are effective and which of those patterns are ineffective. The effective ones we want to lean into a little bit more. We want to embrace those things about ourselves. Say, hey, you've done a good job, keep going. And those ineffective patterns, we need to start to move away from those. So once you start to acknowledge those patterns, we need to get away and distance ourselves from those because they're not serving us in a way that is going to create wins. They're not serving us in a way that is going to make us better. Some people might even call those patterns autopiloting or common tendencies that we have as players, and we all have them. For me personally, it means that I'm a more conservative player, so I'll tend to rest back on my heels and wait maybe sometimes longer than I should, whereas other people, they might be a little bit more aggressive with their play style. Based upon these observations, based upon these insights, based upon this feedback, we need to start adjusting our mindset and we need to start adjusting our strategy. So now that we know our deck list, we've optimized it, we know how to play it, we know all the lines, we know how to execute with our deck list, and we've identified patterns within our own play style and with our deck, and we've refined those patterns. It brings me on to the next topic, which is something that doesn't get talked about in Magic too much. It does in other card games, not so much Magic, but is super, super important, not only for Yawgmoth, but for any deck, whether you're playing limited, constructed, it doesn't matter, and that is bluffing and posturing. Now, these are two things that personally I think I do pretty damn well, but I think that people undervalue how important these things are, whether it is in paper play or online as well. Posturing, it's a little bit more difficult to do that online, but bluffing you can certainly do, and there are so many ways to take advantage of this when you're playing against an opponent. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell a story. You want your opponent to think you have those pocket aces in hand, depending on the situation that the game presents. But you don't always have those cards. So how do you tell the story to make your opponent think that you have something you don't have? So you need to understand, once again, the synergies and the interactions within your deck to present a certain image, to tell a certain story to your opponent. And then you need to be able to apply that in different scenarios, in different game states, in different matchups, depending on the cards that are important and what you want your opponent to believe. You can also do this with your body language, with your hand position, with the way that you're using the cards that are in front of you. You can act as if you're going to be tapping mana when you don't actually have anything to tap the mana for. You can think a little bit longer as if you have something to do when you don't actually have something to do. And those are those posturing sort of things that I mentioned that are more applicable for paper scenarios than they are for online. But all of those things, when combined together, create a narrative for your opponent to start to believe and start to think that you're doing something that maybe you're not doing. One of my favorite things is anytime my opponent asks me, how many cards are in your hand? I always tell them I have, let's say, 3 cards. I always tell them 3 good ones. If they ask me, how many cards do you have in your hand? 5 good ones. I want them to start to think and have their mind working in overdrive that, is he telling the truth? Is he lying to me? Is he just being an a-hole? I don't know. But all of those things add up over the course of a game, over the course of a match, to create a story, to create a narrative, to make things more challenging for your opponents. After we've mastered those first 4 steps, we need to start to master the metagame. So we have an understanding of the decks we're playing against, maybe at a cursory level, but now we really need to delve deeper into the metagame to develop a better understanding of what we're up against. You need to know the archetypes. You need to know how they operate. You need to identify certain cards and strategies and how to play around each of those things. Within each of those strategies, there are probably going to be certain cards that are more important to you than others, certain cards that will interact with your strategy in a more meaningful way. We need to have those cards on our radar. We need to know what those key pieces are that can shut us down, that can interact with us and take us off our path to combo killing or attacking for the win or whatever it might be. There also might be a couple of surprise cards, kind of one-ofs or random things that people might start throwing in here and there that you should probably have on your radar too. They're not going to come up all too often, but when they do, they have a meaningful impact. So having an understanding of those cards within those decks that are at the top of the format that could throw you off your game plan. Once you know those things, you need to have a strategy. You need to have a plan. And then you need to start to execute that plan. And that comes with focused playtesting and tuning, which is my 6th point. You need to refine your understanding of the matchups, and you need to refine your deck lists to combat the decks that are going to be most popular in the format. So you need to have that strategy that we talked about in Metagame Mastery, but now you need to actually apply that information, that knowledge that you've gained. You need to identify weaknesses and strengths of your deck in different matchups. and develop actionable changes to optimize your card choices and to optimize your gameplay. This is a feedback loop, right? This is like the scientific method. So you have a hypothesis, and now you're going to test that hypothesis through real-time gameplay. Once you get that feedback, and if you're playing against somebody you know, you can even ask them for feedback. Hey, what was particularly effective in this matchup? What wasn't? What cards are you most afraid of? Take that information and modify, tune, and tweak your approach and your deck list based upon those things. You then want to retest, see how that new approach or those new cards perform, and then you can draw conclusions based upon those things. So it's not always going to work out the first time you do it, but with repetition and with practice and with feedback, you can start to develop an understanding of how to tune your approach. The seventh key to becoming a Yawgmoth master, and this is my favorite one, is mindset. And I think this is something that nobody in Magic really talks about, and this is so important. Let me give you an example of how this impacted myself as a player over the course of my career. So when I was growing up, I played in a very competitive store. We had some of the top players in the world at my local game store. My first match ever in a tournament was against Osip Levidovic, who was a Pro Tour champion. When I was growing up playing in this store, the only game in town in Somerville, New Jersey, I was very self-conscious about my play choices, and I was lacking confidence with regards to my play. I was afraid to make mistakes. I didn't want to do things wrong because I was playing against a lot of people who I really respected, who I thought were better than me. Approaching the game with this mindset put me at a deficit from the get-go. As opposed to being confident in myself, acknowledging that I was going to make mistakes and being okay with that and learning from those mistakes could have put me so much farther ahead so much earlier. Nowadays, if you couldn't tell, those things are not an issue. I do not struggle with confidence when I play. I'm not self-conscious when I'm playing. Those things are a thing of the past. But what led me to be able to grow and be the person that I am today is having an understanding of what my goals were and developing values and rules based upon those goals that reinforce the positive rather than breaking down the negative. And I think too many players are too tough on themselves. They focus too much on the results when they're testing or when they're in the trenches, so to speak, and they don't focus on personal growth. So identifying what your goals are, what are the things that are going to help me to get towards those goals, and then rewarding yourself when you do those little things along the way will help to reinforce those habits and create a very positive environment for you to learn and get better and get stronger up here. So now that we've addressed all of those things, you need to start to integrate all of them into the person that you are and the player that you are. You need to start to actually put them into practice. That is why today I want to share with you something that I've been working on for a very long time. And I think it's something that can help to do those things for you with regards to these steps that I just outlined. The steps to become a Yawgmoth master. I have just released an 8-week course that I call Clinical Observation to Expertise that goes through all of these steps one by one, week by week, and gives you actionable tasks and goals to achieve these objectives and make you a better player in a faster amount of time. These are the same steps that I went through over the course of years and years of trials and tribulations that I've condensed into 8 weeks and streamlined for you so that you can do it in a much shorter time, much more efficiently. This course is now available for purchase on my Patreon. It is an incredible asset that I am trying to bestow upon you to empower you with the information, the knowledge, and the wherewithal so you can dominate your RC or whatever tournament it is that you are trying to conquer in 2025 and beyond. If you're interested in this course, feel free to reach out to me on my Patreon. I'll have it pinned in the comments. I'll have it pinned in the description. If you reach out to me directly, I can give you the course at a discounted rate as well. And if you want to tackle self-improvement in 2025 and beyond, if you want to be a better player, if you want to achieve your goals with the deck, Black-Green Yawgmoth, this very well might be the best way to do it. So I realize it's not for everybody. Not everybody is as committed to self-improvement and to getting better, but if you are, I would highly encourage you to check this out and give it a try. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I appreciate the attention. I appreciate you sticking around to the end. Until next time, you know the deal. Be well, my friends.